Like we said, she's looking pretty good over here. There's just a final few steps I want to kind of hit on. Looking at the original versus the one we have now. The background's neutral. We've kind of taken care of everything we want to take care of. The only thing I want to address now is the neck down here and the hands or the armpit over here. And since if we look at the texture, we can see that the focal point is more in the nose to the eyes, and the focal point tends to fall off over here. There's not a lot of texture going on. This doesn't bother me too much, but if I wanted to get rid of it, I could do one of two things. I could meticulously go in and dodge and burn most of this stuff, or I can just go in and clone some of it. So here's one way that we can use to clone. For now, just make a new layer, hit the stamp tool. I have a big brush here. My flow is 5%, as you can see up here. The trick is to sample and then swirl, sample and swirl. So I'm going to make a somewhat big brush right around here. I'm going to sample and I'm going to swirl a little bit. And every time I swirl, or if I don't swirl, I may do like just a long stroke. Just so that I don't change the inherent character of the arm, or shape of the arm for that matter, because if I start making stuff light that was dark and dark that was light, I'm actually changing the character or the shape of her body. Not that this part of her body is really that important and that anyone's really going to care. Again, it depends on the client, or if you're the client, if you're the photographer and you want to be really meticulous, dare I say anal about stuff. I'm just sampling and drawing some straight lines, making a smaller brush in this section so they don't bleed too much over here, because I just don't like the white blotchiness. It doesn't bother me too much, but for the sake of argument, most people would frown upon this, saying, "Oh, you're changing the pixels and blah 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 blah. It's the same thing as sandblasting or airbrushing." Well, they may be right, but the fact of the matter is that this is a very unimportant part of the image that's already in the fall off of. See, we've changed a little bit here. That's already in the fall off of the focus. At the end of the day, it doesn't bother me one way or the other. This is one way of handling it. Okay, the other way of handling it is using dodging and burn. So for now, let's just leave this off. Let's go above our retouching layer, and I'm going to use my F key to create my dodge and burn layers. Now we have the dodge and burn tutorials that we went through in some of the other sessions here, versus overlay mode versus the curves mode. So I'm not going to get too much into that. I am going to start doing some dodging and burning here so I can kind of move forward with this image and finish it up. My action set everything up for me, and I highly recommend that if you don't have actions, you set them up yourself. Let's take a look at this area over here and see what it looks like under the curved microscope. Now, if we want to, we can come in here and with the lightning curve, let me grab a brush. Let's grab our 15 or 20 pixel brush. This one right here, which is 20 pixels soft with a 1% flow and a 50% opacity. Not that you have to copy that same thing, but that's what I'm using here. And I'm painting with white in these areas. And I'm using my bracket key to shrink and to expand the size of my brush as I move around. Now you could spend a lot of time in this area. If this was an important feature, like on the face somewhere, or if this is an advertisement and we were trying to actually bring our attention to a specific area, then I'd say go nuts. And again, it's completely up to you. My personal opinion is that this area is not really that important. It's on the side of the image. It falls off in the focal point. I may burn a couple of these things over here. I'm burning right now. I'm switching between dodging and burning, as you can plainly see by my layers palette. I don't expect you to keep up with me. And I'm not going to sit here and dodge and burn this for 2.5 hours and record it and make a ginormous file. What I am going to do is give you a brief overview as to what my plan is, what my agenda is. I'm going to fulfill that agenda as much as I can with you included. Let me just decrease the opacity to 20%. Key commands are very important. I highly recommend you learn them. There, that's not too bad. If I hide this, dodging and burning. Cleaned up just fine. Let's look down here now. Now we can't see it because it's all plugged up, so let's reset the curve. It's in the shadows, so let's open up the shadows a little bit, and we start to see that there's a little bit of schmutz down there. If I increase the contrast, I can kind of see a little bit better as to what I want to address. Go to my lighten curve, 30% opacity. I'm using key commands, so I'm moving quickly. Try and keep up. Get rid of this crease over here. The problem with digital photography is that the shadow areas tend to fall off and break up. Unlike film. We didn't have a problem with that with film. At least it's not as much as we do with digital. So I'm really trying to boost the contrast here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm still dodging. You probably won't see most of this stuff. The curve I'm using is really bringing it out in a big way. Let's darken some of these things over here. I should zoom in a little bit because it seems to be getting a little out of control. Seem to be a little off. Making matters worse. I find it very interesting talking as I retouch, I might add, if you're out there listening to me. Usually I'm by myself, which I am right now, but I'm usually just talking to myself or my dead relatives. Now I get to talk to you. Lucky you. Okay, that's not too bad. Let me change the curve. Notice how I'm adjusting the curve as I go to meet my needs. Yeah, sometimes it gets a little flaky. Let me open this up a little bit. And sometimes I do this. I'll invert the curve to the point where, not bad, I could see more of the schmutz. Increase this over here. You just have to be careful because when you invert the curve like that, sometimes your lighten curve will darken what's there, and vice versa. So just be careful with that. I'm being very picky right now. See, I'm darkening using my lighten curve, so I don't have to go back because of the way the curve is set up. When I lighten something, I'm actually darkening what I'm seeing. So I have to make the visual adjustment. Using these curves has been a godsend, and it really helps with my the signature of my work is the best way I could put it. People see my skin, so I have to go back to my lighten curve here. People see my skin and they just think it's flawless. Sometimes, I mean, I've had my fair share of mistakes, my laziness from time to time. It's all about trying to be as good as you can. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start going through this entire image. I'm going to continue down here with what I've been doing. Now I'm going to go through here. And I'm going to start by really jamming on some of this stuff. See how blotchy this is over here? So I'm going to start to, let's see if the lighten curve works. Yes, it does. I'm going to start to get rid of some of this stuff in here as we go without being too time consuming. I'm going to just fly through some of this. I start in a sector and I start to move left or start to move right. Like here's a problem. There's a little shadow over here. I might want to get rid of. And if I get dull-eyed, is what I call it, when my eyes just get too bored, sometimes I'll squint a little bit. Try it. And you'll start to see a little bit more of what you're looking at. I'm going to move through this entire forehead area. I'm moving very quickly. Again, I'm dodging 30%, 1% flow. And I'm moving through all this stuff. Most of this stuff you will not see by just looking at the image because we have such an incredible contrast curve on. I have one zoom level. And once I finish up a specific area, like the entire forehead, let's just say, I'll zoom out a click and I'll start to see more stuff. It's kind of like I mentioned earlier in one of the tutorials where you watch those science fiction movies where the camera starts off at street level in Manhattan and then goes straight up and it starts to pan out into the state and then the country and then the continent and then the planet and blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Well, you get a different perspective on things when you change your viewpoint. Don't get me started about politics because that's the first thing that came into my mind. Okay. So as you can see, what we've done here, we've started cleaning up the blotchiness, and I can work through this entire image. So what I'm going to do is, I'm now going to, well, let me just show you real fast. This over here, I'm going to put this at 10% opacity. And I'm going to try and just ease up on this. And what this does is it lifts the eyes. Don't go crazy. It's gotta be subtle. You don't want it to look unnatural. I'm using 10% opacity and 1% flow, and I'm just kind of gliding across. Just creating a smooth transition from this highlight into this mid-tone area. And then I'm going across this area over here, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep doing this on my own. You know what I'm up to. I'm starting in quadrants and moving around in specific areas and picking spots that seem to be trouble to me. And instead of you sitting here watching me do this for the next 30 minutes, I'm just going to blow through it and then come back and show you what I did. So stay tuned.